Opium has been cultivated as far back as 3400 BC. It was cultivated in lower Mesopotamia, and the Assyrians actually called it Holgil, or the joy plant. By 1300 BC, the Egyptians began to cultivate opium too, and began shipping it across the Mediterranean Sea to Greece, Carthage, and parts of Europe. By 330 BC, the people of India and Persia are introduced to opium by Alexander the Great. Shortly after, the Chinese are introduced to opium by Arab traders. Opium trade continues as normal for almost 1,000 years, until about the 1300s in Europe, as opium became taboo in Europe because the Inquisition associated anything from the East with the devil. However, opium does make a return in Europe around the time of the Reformation, circa 1527. It was reintroduced in pill form, with the other ingredients being citrus juice and thibacum. By the 1600s, smoking opium and infusing it with drinks becomes recreational in several countries. Around 1700, the Dutch began to import opium to China. They also introduced the practice of smoking opium with a tobacco pipe. In response to this, Chinese Emperor Yung Chen issues an edict that prohibits the smoking of opium and its domestic sale. Around 1750, the East India Trading Company establishes a monopoly on the opium trade, and by 1793, their import reaches over 2,000 chests per year. Because Yung Chen's edict did not work, Chinese Emperor Qia King bans opium completely, making trade and poppy cultivation illegal. In 1803, morphine is discovered as the active ingredient in opium by Dr. Friedrich Serturner. He was able to do this by dissolving opium in acid and then neutralizing it with ammonia. By 1827, the E. Merck Company of Germany is established and begins the commercial production of morphine. As the Chinese continue to attempt to suppress the opium trafficking, Britain sends warships to the coast of China, which starts the First Opium War. And by 1841, the Chinese are defeated by the British. In another part of the world, Dr. Alexander Wood discovers that injecting morphine is a much more effective method of administration. And by 1856, the French and the British start another opium war with China, which they then again lose and are forced to pay reparations for. In 1878, Britain actually passes the Opium Act and attempts to reduce the consumption of opium. And in 1890, U.S. Congress passes a law that will put a tax on both morphine and opium. And then only 5 years later, Heinrich Dresser dilutes morphine with acetals and produces the drug that is now known as heroin. The drug company Bayer would begin selling this drug only 3 years later. After 150 years, in 1910, the Chinese are finally able to persuade the East India Trading Company to dismantle the opium trade to China. And in 1962, Burma is able to outlaw opium completely. Later, in 1973, President Richard Nixon establishes the DEA to counteract drug trafficking and activity in the United States.